If you follow the news, it feels like the US and China are on the brink of this massive economic breakup, right? The tension is everywhere. But what if I told you that breakup isn't about to happen? What if it's already a decade in the past? Okay, let's get into it. So, the common perception, what you hear on TV and read online, is that this all started pretty recently. The story usually goes that the whole decoupling thing kicked off with the tariffs under the Trump administration back in 2018, or maybe it's because of the more recent and, let's be honest, more volatile trade disputes we've seen since. But the data, well, the data tells a very, very different story, a much quieter one. It's a story that really challenges everything we think we know about this relationship. So the real question is, what if we've been watching the horizon for a split that's already in our rearview mirror? Yep, that's the year. Not 2018, not last year, 2014. The numbers across finance, trade, investment, you name it, they all point back to 2014 as the moment the tide really, truly turned. This wasn't some noisy, headline-grabbing event. It was a quiet, deliberate process that started a long, long time ago. So, how do we know this? Well, let's start with the first piece of evidence. Just follow the money. We're going to look at China's financial relationship with the United States, and what you're about to see is not some simple shuffle. It's a full-on retreat. Now, the first question people usually ask is a good one. I get it. Sure, China sold some of its U.S. government bonds, but maybe they just moved that cash into other American stuff, right? A totally reasonable thought, except the facts just don't back it up. So if they weren't buying treasuries, where else could the money be? Let's look at the options. Could it be in mortgage-backed securities? Bundles of home loans? Nope. Their holdings there are tiny, negligible, really. Okay, what about corporate bonds? Again, they're a bit player, as the source material calls them. Even in stocks and direct investments in businesses, they've actually been pulling back, not putting more in. No matter where you look, the trend is crystal clear, and it's pointing down. And this brings us to a really crucial point. It's not just about the raw dollar amount. To get the real picture, you have to look at the relative size of what China holds. And this is where that whole narrative, the one about China holding all the financial cards, really starts to fall apart. Let's put this into perspective. A decade ago, China's stash of US Treasuries was somewhere around 10 to 12% of its own GDP. I mean, that's a huge number. Today, get this, it's collapsed to just around 4%. And the story's the same when you look at their rainy day fund, their foreign reserves. US Treasuries used to make up over 40% of that pile of cash. Now, it's less than a quarter. But honestly, here's the number that's the most stunning. When you zoom all the way out and look at the entire ocean of US federal debt, all of it, China's share is a mere 2%. So this whole idea that they could crash our economy by dumping debt, it's just out of date. So let's just call it what it is. It's a broad retreat. China's entire footprint in U.S. assets is shrinking. They're recycling less money back into our debt, and they're strategically, deliberately moving away. This isn't just a simple shift, it's a slow-motion exit that's been underway for a decade. Okay, so now let's see how this exact same trend plays out in the physical economy. Because this isn't just a story you find buried in financial ledgers. It's just as clear when you look at the actual flow of goods and investments. These two charts right here basically tell the exact same story. On the left, you've got U.S. exports to China as a share of our economy. See that peak? That was over a decade ago, and it's been drifting down ever since. Now look to the right, that's foreign investment going into China, and you see that same downward slope starting right around, you guessed it, 2014. And here's another stunning piece of the puzzle. For all the talk we hear about China overtaking the U.S., since 2014, its economy, relative to the size of the U.S. economy, has basically done a round trip. It's gone nowhere. For a whole decade, they have made zero progress in closing that gap. That whole economic convergence story, it's stalled out. So all this evidence, it's all pointing to the same conclusion. This decoupling isn't new. It's a decade old. But that brings up the big question, right? Why did it start then? And what does this new reality actually mean for us today? Look, this economic data doesn't happen in a vacuum. It lines up perfectly with a major shift in geopolitics. In 2013, the U.S. announced its pivot to Asia. Then in 2014, Russia's actions in Crimea showed the world that a new era of global competition was beginning. It really looks like both sides saw the writing on the wall and just began quietly, methodically moving apart.
So, the big takeaway from all of this is that China isn't planning to de-risk its economy from the US. It's a process they've already been deep into for 10 years. They are way less tangled up with us, financially and economically, than most people seem to believe. The breakup? It already happened.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty provocative thought. If China has spent a decade quietly selling off its US assets, who's been buying them? Well, as the source material puts it, if anything, we're the ones trapped because US institutions and households are the real bag holders now. That just completely flips the script on who holds the risk in this relationship, doesn't it? Definitely something to think about.